Sí, o sea, lo podéis ver cuando queráis.
No es eso, es que entonces tengo que tener más cuidado.
Ya. We are in. So, thank you very much. My first word is to say thank you to Diego de Ojeda, who very kindly is here with us. And we are talking today about the new European defense policy, because there have been many changes in the last just few weeks, even less,
and more to come.
And more to come. So I think it's a very hot topic. We have plenty of people on the other side of the camera seeing us. My first question for you, Diego, is just make a kind of presentation of your work in the European Commission, because you're working in the Secretariat General, which is, I guess, the most difficult and at the same time compelling place to work in the European institution. We have many students on the other side of the camera. You can explain to them what are you doing in the Secretariat General and specifically in your unit, which is defense and security.
Okay, so thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody connected. We don't see.
No, can't see.
So we're speaking to the outer space, hoping that there are somebody on the other end. My name is Diego de Ojeda. I've been working in the Commission for the last over 25 years, always on security and defense, and lately as well on a new concept, which is preparedness and in the face of crisis. In the last 10, 11 years, I've been working in the Secretariat General. The Secretariat General, for those that do not know, is one of the departments in the Commission, one of the Director Generals, but it's the one that works directly under the President. In Spain, that would be the equivalent would be the Ministry of the President. But it's only a simplification, because the role of the Secretariat General is to ensure that the political guidelines of the President are implemented by the different Director Generals, but also to coordinate among all of these and arbitrate among all of these Director Generals when there's a conflict of divergence of views, as well as to ensure that the very I wouldn't say very heavy, but the very detailed working methods and rules of procedure are followed by all of the services. And then we also play an interaction with NATO. My unit deals with EU-NATO cooperation, or with the European Investment Bank, or with the External Action Service, which is not part of the Commission as such. So yes, we're not bored, and particularly since the outbreak of the war, of the invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. But I suspect that we will get more into that.
Yeah, later. For sure. That will be the question. So, okay. So I think part of the job is to do risk assessment, I guess. And my first question is, what is right now the situation here, the European Union in the global geopolitical context? Because we have, as you mentioned, war in Ukraine, growing tension in Asia Pacific, especially because of the Taiwan Strait, tension with China, and of course, what is going on in Washington, D.C. in the past few months, because I don't know which is more important of the three, Moscow, Washington, or Beijing, for you right now.
For us, the most important is Brussels and the different EU capitals, because many of the things, many of the problems, many of the risks, many of the challenges that we face, we would be so much better equipped if we did the homework internally. The European Union is not a nation state; it's an international organization, but it is not an international organization like the Council of Europe or the UN. It's an international organization which is in many ways much more similar to a nation state than to an international organization. But then it has its own ways of internal decision making, including unanimity in many areas, like fiscal or foreign policy, certainly defense. And then you have 27 member states who do not always see eye to eye. And that's fine, but that's fine as long as everyone tries to solve the conflicts or the problems and solve the disagreements. Not so fine when some decide to systematically use the veto power, that unanimity. So one thing is to decide by consensus, and a different one is to view that you have a veto power. Because when you exercise the veto, you don't necessarily achieve a consensus through a compromise. So, and then we have the European Parliament, and so sometimes we're slow. So, for instance, in the face of the threat of tariffs on the US, well, if we actually managed to solve many of the outstanding problems in the EU internal market, which would be, we would be, well, first of all, a lot stronger, much more competitive, and a lot less dependent on some areas. So, I don't care if it's Trump or Biden or whoever, it will have a lot less impact on me if I've done my homework. And in many areas, we have not done our homework. Defense is one of them. Defense, for many years, for many decades, we have not done enough. Neither the member states nor the EU in Brussels. And for many reasons. But and now we're trying to catch up. And it should be very clearly underlined that the main responsibility for defense is and will remain in our member states. Defense is a national competence. We in the Commission, we don't have any competence as regards defense, none whatsoever. We don't have armed forces, and we don't want to have them. We don't deploy them. We don't buy weapons, and we don't want to buy them. So it's our member states. What we are doing is we're telling them that they can do better if they do it together, and they need to spend more, and we're trying to find ways to facilitate so that they can spend more. And doing better and doing it together and spending more, it would not make any sense if they would continue spending most of it outside the EU, because we need to enhance our defense readiness, and an indispensable element of defense readiness is to have defense industry that can produce what you need. Because if you go into a battle, I mean, of course, nobody wants to go into a battle or into a war. We're not a military organization, and we're not planning to be one, but it so happens that we might be attacked because we have a neighbor that has a track record of attacking its neighbors. So it may be us next time around, or maybe not. But if you have sufficient deterrence, you actually help prevent that dangerous scenario from happening. So for deterrence, you need weapons. But for deterrence, you also need companies that can produce weapons, so that if and when you use the weapons, you can replace them. But we don't have enough defense industry production capacity in Europe. By the way, that's also in the US. The US is also thinking that they need to have much more agile and efficient defense production capacity. But we certainly don't, and we need to develop it. And that's why what we're saying is that member states have to spend more. They have to spend together through joint procurement. So it's not enough if every one of them buy their own tanks and their own helicopters, among other reasons, because then you have many different types of helicopters and they cannot act together, and you don't have any interoperability. And if you want to donate them to Ukraine, then I donate 3, you donate 5, you donate 10, and then the Ukrainians don't know how to use them, and you have to train them for each and every type of helicopter. So it's not efficient. And this is basically what NATO is telling our 23 of our member states who are members of NATO. So they need to buy together. But by buying together, you also achieve other things, which is that if you have a limited pool of companies that can supply you and everybody spends more, well, immediately you have inflation. And then you get the same output for double the price, which is not, obviously not, is great for defense companies, but it's not great for readiness or for public finance. So if you buy together, then you aggregate demand, and then you have a better leverage towards the companies. And companies also profit because then they have a much greater predictability of the demand, which allows them to make the necessary investments to increase production capacity. Which is, in a nutshell, I've just described what we said in mid-March in the white paper on European Defense Readiness 2030. You member states need to spend more. You have agreed to spend more in NATO. So we give you some help to spend more, but you need to spend better. So we're giving you also some tools to spend better. And all of this needs to be reflected or needs to have an impact, positive impact on increasing the production capacity of defense companies. And in 2 weeks from now, we will adopt what we call the Defense Omnibus proposal, which is a proposal to simplify a lot of a lot of regulatory and non-regulatory hurdles that are negatively affecting also the defense industry production capacity. So we're trying to operate not only from the members, from the demand, but also trying to help the supply improve.
And with this initiative and this view about the idea of sharing the burden of the defense and across the member states, do you have a fluid dialogue with your colleagues in NATO? Or it seems that we are preparing something alternative to NATO or a European defense system, okay, based on member states, but apart from what is going on right now with the NATO, with the United States, and with European countries? Because as we have seen in recent months, UK is trying to come in again in the European defense system. You know more than me about that.
I wish. Okay, but let me backtrack a bit. I said that we have no competence on defense. So then why the hell do we put out a white paper on European defense? It seems to be a bit contradictory. Well, what we do have is competence on defense industry, because defense industry is industry, and we do have competence over the internal market. So everything that we do from the angle of defense industry, as I tried to explain earlier. Therefore, we don't compete with NATO in any way. We're not trying to replace NATO. We're not trying to undermine NATO. And actually, we argue that what we do NATO profits greatly from what we do. Because if 23 of our member states will, thanks to us, have better access to finance so that they can spend as much as NATO asks them to, point one, and point two, through joint procurement, they enhance their interoperability and they get more output for the same money. And point three, our defense industry in 23 allies of NATO increases, well, NATO will achieve its targets much faster. So to me, the possibility, the position, if anybody has it, that the EU is a NATO rival is completely absurd and ideological and based on ignorance of what we are actually doing. Fortunately, our colleagues in NATO do not have that ignorance. They are, I mean, of course, they're not experts on what we do. We're not experts on what they do, but we have a constant dialogue with NATO. We have, which is increasing. At the beginning of, let's say last summer, we had 2 structured dialogues with NATO, meaning 2 areas on which we would meet with NATO on a regular basis, 2 or 3 a year, with everybody at the table, to touch base on what they are doing and what we're doing, and if possible, do things together, or at least in the same direction. Now we have 7. So from 2 to 7 in 1 year. Why? Because we have come to the conclusion, or they have come to the conclusion, that what we do in a number of areas is very helpful to them. Sometimes we cannot agree. For instance, NATO is asking, I cannot reveal, I cannot be very open, but NATO is asking us for help in terms of fuel. Well, then we have our own, Green Deal legislation that says that we cannot help when it comes to fossil fuel, but our resources can go for renewable energies. So in that much we can help. In the other we can't. But we're not NATO, so NATO can still do it. It's not. We're not a problem for NATO. And the clearest example where NATO continues to underline every time that we are of great service or our job is very helpful to them is military mobility. At the time of the Cold War, everybody had many tanks, but they were all in Germany, and everybody knew that it was going to be a battle. It was going to be a massive tank destruction battle in Germany. Of course, I'm simplifying, but then after the Cold War, everybody reduced the number of tanks massively. So now, if you had 100, now you have 10. But in addition, now the border has increased. So now you have, with 10 tanks, you have to cover from Tallinn in Estonia to Bucharest in Romania, which you cannot do. So you have to buy more tanks, obviously, for which you need to produce more tanks. But in addition, you need to be able to move your tanks. And when I mean tanks, I mean any military supplies, soldiers, and for that, in some cases, you need infrastructure that is able. It's not the same to have a highway, a civilian highway, or to have a dual-use highway that can also withstand, or a bridge, let's say, that can withstand the movement of military hardware. So we started 5 years ago to do this. We've already spent 1.7 billion, so 1,700 million in Spanish, in large-scale infrastructure projects throughout Europe to improve military mobility. But this, of course, will take years because the absorption capacity is enormous. I mean, if you have 100 billion, then you will put them at good use. It, of course, does not only benefit military mobility. I mean, if you have a dual-use highway that you didn't have, everybody can profit from the highway when you're not at war. So that's it has a very good spillover effect over the economy. And that's also one thing that I would like to underline, that more money for defense is not actually money for war, it's money for peace. Because if you have deterrence, you are ensuring peace. Antonio Costa, president of the European Council, social democrat, said the other day that peace without deterrence is illusory. It's very nice. Of course, we have to promote dialogue, and we have to promote diplomatic negotiations, and we have to, I'm not a warmonger, but there's no police. So I'm against free weapons for citizens, but that's because there's a police that protects you. When there's no police, and you have a very nasty, aggressive neighbor that gets drunk every 2 weeks and slams the door of its neighbors and has raped other neighbors in the past, then you might need a gun at home. Not necessarily to shoot him, but because if you have the gun, the drunken guy may not slam your door. So that's a very graphic example, but that's very much how it is. But in addition to weapons or defense being an investment in peace, defense investment is also a great boom for the economy, because there's a high-tech sector and high-skilled workers. So if you spend 1 billion in defense, you get a much higher economic spillover effect than if you spend 1 billion on tourism. It's medium and long term, much more sustainable. So when we make sure that member states will be able to spend more on defense, this greatly enhances our chances of maintaining peace or preventing war, but it also is a good boom for the economy. So it's not true that more guns, less hospitals. Well, yeah, more guns or more anything is less of whatever you're doing. You need to somehow balance your expenditure, but money on defense brings an overall very positive effect to the rest of the economy as well.
So in that sense, and in providing this spending could attains better levels of performance, of economic performance, the next question is, you are mostly concerned about the European defense industry in that sense, so not in the properly speaking military plans. And in that sense, my next question is, new technology developments should be key for this defense industry. And what is the role of universities for you in that development of new technologies and the innovation and those stuff? Because probably you will know that there is a kind of debate, not only the Spanish universities, but also European universities about the ethical questioning of collaboration with the defense industry. And my guess is that there are plenty of issues surrounding defense industry that should not end at the end in some weapon or some tool for killing somebody, because you have risk assessment, which is, I think, is the most important one, but there are many other areas related with security provided for that. So yes, because most of our audience are universities, coming from the university and academics and students.
I have no clue as to how universities can join the bandwagon or profit from this, but there are ample opportunities, and you don't need to engage yourself in defense. I don't think anybody's asking universities to cooperate in building the next tank or the next jet fighter, but there's a enormous space for dual-use technologies, and dual-use technologies is a growing segment of defense. It used to be, and everybody knows how internet came from the Pentagon, whatever, and then it went out to the civilian life. So it used to be that that research was in the military field, and then it spilled over the civilian economy. Now, more and more, especially because of the cyber revolution, more and more, it is the other way around. So it is civilian research and development that gets used by the military, who builds a military application. So if you're talking about lenses, if you're talking about quantum technology, if you're talking about, there's so many areas which are purely civilian, but can have a military application. So if you take those concerns to the extreme, you have to refrain from almost anything. I mean, you can only eat pasta because that's for sure not going to be aggressive. But if you develop anything cyber, it can be used in an aggressive manner. Anyway, we're not talking about aggressive. We're talking about defense. Okay, so we're not talking about capabilities, as they're called. That would if you're, let's see, air defense. To anybody with pacifist or with concerns about defense, I'll say, okay, so when you hear about the Russian incoming missiles on Ukrainian cities, killing people or destroying energy substations, now helping develop the means to ensure that those missiles do not kill, is that bad? Is that aggressive? Is that I mean, maybe Gandhi would not do it, but there was only one Gandhi. I prefer to have the means to stop that. Or when you go into some areas in Ukraine where citizens in the street are being followed by a drone that then goes and attacks them. We need anti-drone technology. Look at what the Ukraine did the other day with the Russian planes. You know what I was thinking? Maybe I guess this is fairly. I was thinking, great inspiration for the next Bin Laden. What if somebody is able to do that in the street of any European city? We need anti-drone technology. We need to be able to jam that, or to I don't know how, but we need that. And
because the Russian areas was super security military areas.
They brought trucks with furniture, and inside those furniture there was this, and then they say they used AI. What I don't know the details, but basically you can bring one of those number of drones into a city, and if you have the explosive and you know how to run it or whatever, you need anti-drones. This is only 6-7 years ago. I was following very intensely also the Syria war. ISIS. I remember when the first time ISIS used a drone. That was like a big revolution. Now it's being used. Now the war is with drones mostly. that is civilian research. Most of those drones are not defense. You put some explosive and then it becomes a gun. So if you're going to have those concerns, you're going to have to withdraw from most research, if you wish. And by the way, I don't see where is the ethical implication of cooperating in developing an anti-drone technology that would protect you from an attack on drones.
So, talking about drones and talking about this kind of hybrid, I will say, warfare, is there
No, different. Hybrid is something
different?
else.
Yep.
Hybrid is all sorts of attacks or hostile acts that do not come under the category of conventional attack. So if a drone comes and hits you, that's war or terrorism.
That's now is conventional.
Yeah, that's war. If a drone comes and spies or disrupts things, that's sabotage, and that would start being hybrid.
But going to the hybrid and the I think it's a very widespread idea that we are suffering every day hundreds of cyber attacks coming from
And
Russia
and disinformation.
Disinformation. Is there any line of policy or
Very much.
research on your side, on the European Commission, on that?
Yeah, a lot. Well, first of all, it's not just the European Commission. Then there's the External Action Service, and there's the member states, of course. In my unit, we also deal with countering hybrid threats. Then DG Home, which would be the Ministry of Interior, deals a lot with the protection of critical infrastructures. So, what if these drones all of a sudden put down all of our hospitals, or 5 hospitals in my country or your country, whichever, or you put them down through hacking, or you poison the water, the drinking water, or we saw it with the blackout in Spain. All of my colleagues were immediately, that's the Russians. I was like, I'm not sure. No. No, I always prefer to. I'm a lawyer by training, so I would. The Russians are innocent and proven guilty.
Okay.
Not necessarily proven guilty like in a court of law, but at least until I have some indications that they're involved. If I don't know, I'm not just going to say, "Oh, this must be the Russians." The Russians or anybody else, but it could have been the Russians or someone else, and then what do? So you need to prevent that. So you need to enhance your resilience. So after the white paper on defense, which we did in mid-March, on the 3rd or 4th week of March, I can't remember, we put out something called the preparedness strategy. And then came Commissioner Labib, which is the commissioner in charge, with that famous video, which you might have come across, about the survival kit. And everybody was making laugh of her. Very good. We live in a democracy. You're entitled to make laugh. I saw even a Spanish meme with ham and whatever, all very funny. People were calling me, "Oh, if that is what you guys are doing, God help us," etc., etc. Boom, came the blackout, and then everybody is buying the bloody toolkit. Okay, so ni tanto ni tan calvo. You don't need to carry.
I can translate that into English.
Neither nor. You don't need to bring the toolkit every time you go to the loo. But you better have some awareness, at least awareness that some of the basic things that we take for granted may disappear. But that's not prevention. That's response. In terms of prevention, you can increase the resilience. How do you, for instance, cables? You have underwater cables in the Baltic Sea in particular, but also in the Atlantic. If you would cut all of the cables that connect Europe with the US, your ATM would not give you money. And then how long it would take to repair them? So one way of course, you can police those cables, but it's the whole bloody Atlantic. It's easier in the Baltic, and there's so many. Some are financial, some are energy, some are data and cyber cables. The second thing you can do is have double the cables, because of course if you have 10 cables, it's easier to put them down than if you have 20 or you have 40. Of course, that takes some money, but by increasing, reducing your or diversifying, you increase your resilience, and then of course you can protect. So a few years now, I think it's 3 years, we came out with a directive, which most people know. It's a draft legal text, which member states have to implement with their own laws within certain law and parameters. So it's not directly applicable law in the member states on the protection of critical infrastructures. Then we've seen a spike in incidents regarding critical infrastructures. So we've asked our member states to implement this faster. And then, in addition, we're telling them, and by the way, you need to go beyond that. And our member states are fully aware and fully on board. But then, of course, making this into law is difficult. Think about Spain, for instance.
Yeah.
So Spain has not implemented the directive. Why not? Well, our guys in DG Home are following with the Spaniards. Not implementing the directive does not mean that you're not doing the homework. You can do what the directive says without the directive. But why? Because the government was not able to pass the law in Spain. I don't care. I want Spain to be protected. Also,
just do the homework.
I do care particularly about Spain, but I care about Malta as well, or about France, because it's in an interconnected world. So if we do our homework, but your neighbor doesn't, you're also in deep trouble. So we are working to protect critical infrastructures, to increase resilience, meaning to expand or diversify and reduce our dependencies. This applies also to economic security. The Suez Canal, remember that ship that
perfect.
All of a sudden, I went to buy a car, more or less at that time, and they told me a year and a half. But it was a year and a half because they didn't have chips. Anyway, and we're protecting ourselves on the cyber world. There you have the Digital Services Act, which is, I think, a massive improvement as compared to before. And then we're asking the major online platforms to comply with a number of things, at least in Europe, in terms of fighting or countering pedophilia, but terrorism, but also hate and xenophobia and disinformation. And there, in disinformation, of course, the line is a bit more tricky. What is freedom of expression? What is disinformation? And I am always on the side of freedom of expression, of course, but I do know that there are foreign governments that pay lots of money to organize malign interference campaigns. This is a fact. We know it. There are people trying to disrupt.
Not only Russians, so many other governments in the world.
I'm not sure. I think I know what you mean, but I don't know of any government that is using money to pay people to jump on every opportunity for internal disruption that there is, whether it's the process in Catalonia, and then they immediately come, but they would come to anything in Portugal the same. I'm not sure. When they were sort of helping Trump won in the campaign, I'm not sure if they were doing it for affinity with Trump. I think much more they were doing it to disrupt
the country.
Clinton, whom they thought was going to win. They have a book, which is, whenever you see an opportunity to forge disunity internally, go for it. With money, with hacking, with journalists. I mean, I don't know. You just need. Well, fortunately now it's difficult, but just read Russia. I mean, see Russia Today or Sputnik or what have you, and how
they manipulate information
and artificial intelligence, etc. So that exists. How to contain it is debatable. And we may agree or disagree on this is okay, this is not okay, but we need to contain it somehow, because because it's not innocent. It's not just that there is left wing or right wing. No, it's or extreme left and extreme right that disagree. No, in some case, I don't have a problem with critics from the extreme left or from the extreme right. I do have a problem when they're paid by a foreign country.
Okay, so I guess we can stop here because I'm pretty sure there will be questions from people here first, and then I will take questions from the people on the internet. And I have also many questions to you, but I'm going to refrain myself and give to you the turn. So you have questions for Diego here?
Yes.
Yes, please.
First, thank you so much for the speech. I have a quick question regarding the one of these concepts of the well. First, I agree with the deterrence concept, and then the preparedness concept, because we talk about having the industry made in Europe. You know, we have to do the guns, we have to do the helicopters, we have to do the drones. But I'm asking some specific deficits we have. For example, not enough production of gunpowder, which at the same time needs precursors, which are cotton, for example, that we do not produce in the EU, that are produced entirely in China. So I'm wondering, is there a chapter within this strategy to really bring some of those productions of other rare elements, such as, I don't know, all those rare elements are in the border between Mongolia and China or other regions in the world, and they need to be extracted and they need to be processed if we want to have the production in Europe. So is this chapter being treated?
Yes, which does not mean that we have easy solutions. So before the white paper on defense, we came last year with a European economic security strategy. And then we basically said that excessive dependencies are unhealthy. They're dangerous. Of course, having excessive dependency of an ally is bad, because excessive is bad. But excessive dependency of an adversary is worse, is much more dangerous. So that also helps you prioritize a bit. But excessive dependencies, by definition, is bad. Otherwise, they wouldn't be excessive, right? So when you import 90% of anything from just one supplier, or 60 or 70% from one just supplier, then if that supplier has a problem, you have a problem. And if that supplier wants you to have a problem, then you have a problem. So we came up with that, and the solution is that we have to we have to promote, protect, and partner. In some areas, we could be doing better. We could be producing more. So we have to promote. We have to reindustrialize, perhaps, in some areas at least, to a certain level, in order to depend less from the outside. But we're not trying to get to autarky, but having nothing. We saw it with the pandemic, how absurd it is that you cannot produce masks. So promote, protect, partner. In some areas, if you don't have the raw material, maybe you cannot promote, but then you partner with, not just with one, but with more, even if one is always cheaper, but then you might have to go to others. So when you're talking about lithium or rare earths, well, there are other places where there are rare earths. The problem is it's environmentally not fine. So, but other people are doing it. So let's partner, diversify, and then protect. In some areas, we need to protect, and protect means that what we have, we don't allow takeover. And there have been plenty of cases where, I don't know, this university, this whatever, they develop this thing or whatever, and boom, 3 years later comes someone and buys it and takes the intellectual property with it, which doesn't make sense economically, but it doesn't really make sense from a security point of view if that IP is going to be used later on to threaten you. So yes, it's an issue on which we're working on. I'd like to think that with some results, and that's what I see. Of course, we should be doing 10 times better, 10 times faster. Because, and this I didn't say, why are we doing all this? We're doing it because the threat has increased massively and the guarantees have decreased. So we're in a situation I said at the beginning, I've been working on these things for 25 years. I have never been in a situation like this. I always like to think that, I have a very good feeling of what's coming. I don't now. And worse, whoever thinks they do, I think they have no clue. It's even more dangerous. So we thought that the danger of a European country invading another one was gone. I mean, Francis Fukuyama in 1991, the end of history, this and that and the other. Oh yeah, there was Yugoslavia, but Yugoslavia was an implosion of no country invaded another one in Europe. Not so many outside Europe either, but now, boom, you have one. Okay, 2008, Georgia happened. 2014, Ukraine happened. That was an eye-opener, but they didn't try to take over the whole country. Now they did. Once you do that, you may do it again, particularly if your narrative that Ukraine always was ours, doesn't really need to exist, etc., also applies to Poland or to Lithuania, etc. Okay, so that's one. But two, the US is saying now more clearly with this Trump 2 administration, but they started saying it with Obama, that they're moving away from Europe, partly because they thought Europe was under control, but partly because they have other priorities, and now Trump has a very clear cost reduction objective. So the U.S. commitment to the security of the European continent is waning. I don't know if it will disappear completely or it will just be partial, and I don't know if it's going to be drastic or it's going to be gradual. So of course I want partial and gradual. But it's very clear that we need to take care a lot more about our security. Otherwise, go neutral, and let's all try to become Switzerland. But I have the feeling that Switzerland's neutrality is much better because it's surrounded by non-neutral countries, or Costa Rica without an army. Very good, but look at the neighbors. They're not prone to invade. We do have this neighbor that, at least in the past and in the present, does not seem to. This is the reason why we're doing what we're doing. It's not because we're trying to give more profits to defense companies, or because neocons or warmongering. This is not right wing or left wing. This is survival. Anyway, sorry. So otherwise, there won't be questions.
No, it's fine. Perfect. Any questions from here? No. Before going to the question of life, because there are some questions regarding the funding and the cost of all this, I would like to ask you to explore a bit more on this last thing, because my perception, I don't know if you agree, because you have a deeper knowledge of the issues, that there is a kind of concern, very strong concern in the eastern flank of the European Union about what will happen not with Russia, not in terms of conventional warfare, but on hybrid warfare. And going to the other sides of Europe, to the Iberian Peninsula, there is no concern at all. So it's something that the people there, to remember Ignacy, the day of the blackout in Madrid, nobody was prepared for that. And you told me, no, people in Brussels are preparing for that, and people in northern countries are preparing for that. So my question is, this asymmetry is a weakness for us?
It's a fact of life. And there is history and there's geography. So, of course, I remember Prime Minister of Spain, Pedro Sanchez, said, I don't think the Russian tanks are going to come through the Pyrenees anytime soon. And he's right. He's right. Now, the blackout, you may have. The hacking, you may have. The terrorism or sabotage, you may have. And what about the economic effect of a Russian invasion of Lithuania, for instance, in Spain? Can you imagine? So, of course, you're part of the club and you will be heavily affected, even if not. And then in the particular case of Spain and Portugal, I was just having this conversation yesterday in Ghent with an academic, and she was telling me, listen, you guys have this very long history of not, we did not participate in the First World War. We did not participate in the Second World War. We have internal conflict instead, but we haven't had the wars for
Europe,
for such a long time. So there's a lot less of a perception. One of the few countries that has not been invited by Germany and or Russia. Most European countries have been invited by both a couple of times. So of course the awareness is lower. Okay. And last summer, I remember I was at the beach and my kids were in the water, and then I was working and with the phone, and it was Commissioner Breton saying that Europe had to move towards a war economy. I was looking at the beach, everybody was in the chiringuito having gambas, and I was like, oh my, I'm gonna go. It's like, and it's not only Spaniards, it's Germans, Belgians, English, French. So we're not at war. We do not need to move to a war economy. We do not need to panic. The Russians are not going to invade, not only not Spain, but Lithuania tomorrow. That's not going to happen. They cannot. They're trying to invade Ukraine, and they are making extremely small gains at a massive cost economically and in terms of weapons and manpower. So there's no chance that they will invade. I mean, the nuclear threat is of course there, but other than that, conventional invasion from Russia, I will sign here 5 years, 10 years. 10 years, I'm not sure, but 5 years for sure. But it depends. For as long as the Ukraine war continues, they won't. Now, I hope the Ukrainian war will end as soon as possible. But they have really moved into a war economy. They're, the workforce, first of all, they have a big demographic crisis. A lot of people have left. But in addition, defense companies are paying double the normal price. So everybody's working for defense companies. And the army is paying an enormous amount of money for people to go to the front. So their economy is wrecked for decades, in addition to the sanctions. But the war economy gets moving, and then it has an inertia. The war in Ukraine finishes, the war economy continues. In 5 years, in 10 years, you have rebuilt your army. If you continue to have this narrative that this was always Russian and it should be, and by the way, you don't lose in Ukraine, you just tie, then you are really a threat. And that might be in 10 years from now. Some security services say 5, some say 7, some say 4. I think I will be closer to the 10. And that's why I want to have the deterrence for when that moment comes. And you don't build deterrence in one day. When it comes to preparedness, resilience is expensive, but of course, if there's a crisis and you're not prepared, it's 10 times more expensive. So there's a balance to be made. You cannot have 100% security. You cannot have, and it is too costly anyway. But I mean, I heard from a taxi driver the other day in Madrid that people were not able to go back to their homes because they didn't have Google Maps to their homes. I mean, there's people that do not know their way home without Google Map. Now,
I saw that.
Well, but that's a degree of unpreparedness that you should not have anyway, right? So in between being prepared 100% and being so weak, there's a balance.
Ignacio.
Yes, Diego, thank you so much. I'm Ignacio Salvador, representing 4 Spanish universities here. One of them is Autonomous Alianza Cuatro Universidades. I would like to dig, sorry for my voice, I would like to dig a bit more on this preparedness concept, because actually looking into the defense strategy, you see a lot of investment in, of course, in preparing our military resources. But what maybe we are lacking, and this is my question, is how to actually really prepare the population, our people, our citizens for what is coming. And here is where it comes on whether we should invest more on research and innovation on social science and humanities to actually really have the citizens prepared for these eventual casualties that might come. And we saw that in a blackout. It was actually in Madrid, in Autonomous. And I think people kind of react or behave quite well.
No, that was impressive.
Although
The degree of calm.
correct. So I would say that even, like maybe the critical thinking is there already, and people didn't really actually panic. Some people might have panic, but it's like, why we don't really prepare citizens better, as well as preparing our military resources. Maybe we are doing it, I don't know.
We are. From Brussels, we are advancing a lot in the conceptual and the regulatory framework. But of course, then this needs to be implemented, and that is mostly by our member states. But we are. Collectively, we're 10 times better prepared than we were 10 years ago. Listen, I have an anecdote. I was working for a guy who had a friend, and all of a sudden I was in a weekend, spending a weekend in Avila, of all places, with a British guy, with a British minister who had come to Spain to study, had come to Madrid to study how Madrid had dealt with El 11S. Because it was like they were absolutely surprised about the serenity, the maturity, the response, the collective, very, very efficient response of Madrid. And then they were absolutely shocked to find out that there were no protocols whatsoever. It was all spontaneous. It was all improvised. It was, taxi drivers doing things for free and whatever. So I think in Spain, at least in Madrid, which is 11S and blackout, we don't know how this would have been in Vigo, but I suspect similarly, but we don't have evidence. The population tends to be fairly relaxed and sensible and common sense in terms of how they respond. Of course, it's not the same to have a blackout of 8 hours and to hear in the middle of the blackout that is only going to last another 6 hours, as they tell you it's going to last 3 weeks, or it catch you in the middle of the night. So it was a benign scenario taking this, but of course in between then and now, between 11S and now, massive progress has been made. How to make people more aware? I was literally yesterday in this symposium. I was in the Ghent University. There was a European general saying that the governments had to provoke blackouts on purpose to increase awareness. I mean, I thought that was suicidal, of course, but of course that's the most effective way of enhancing preparedness. Putting that aside as a crazy idea, you can of course, but you can do this kind of talk. You can, in universities, you can teach. Perhaps the curricula can evolve into using some preparedness, civilian preparedness and response. Traditionally, that has been a subject that's been only against natural disasters. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to adapt all of the civil protection and prevention to also man-made disasters. But I have to say there was a mission by a colleague of mine. No, they were in a symposium in Krakow in Poland, and the Spanish model was mentioned as being very comprehensive and very well integrated. So and in Spain we have La UME, for instance. I remember because I happened to be in at the government when it was created, and that's something that not many member states in the European Union have. So there's also a very good case for copying best practices from neighbors. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Maybe the Italians are doing something very good, and so you just have to import it.
what I want to dig more is into whether actually from your perspective and your unit, you would also actually invest some resources to finance maybe this
No,
learning process.
not in my unit, because we're in the Secretariat General and we do not implement. If any, it wasn't me doing the coordination for the security strategy. It was a colleague of mine for the preparedness strategy. I was dealing with the white paper, but we don't implement. We are, as I said at the beginning, we coordinate so that all of the actors, and we deliver the final product. This is a responsibility for member states in the first place, and for other departments in the commission that can provide funding and organize events to enhance awareness. But at the end of the day, I mean, we do not replace member states.
Okay, so just to finish, because we are exceeding the time, but there are few questions here, and on
I'm not in a rush.
Okay.
Well, there's Spain is playing at 9, right? But other than that,
then we'll stop now. Okay. No, there are questions. Some of them are very easy because there are many students there. So I think there's one very interesting is, are there any plans for a truly European intelligence agency?
no.
No.
For that, you need to. I was gonna make a joke. You need to be intelligent first. No. No, and it links with how I ended the previous question. We don't replace member states. Member states have security services or intelligence services. What we do have is something called INCEN, Intelligence Center, which is that here in Brussels, each and every member state sends 2, 3, 5, 20 spies, intelligence agents here. So the CNI has, I don't know if it's 2 or 7 or 25. I have no idea how many, but there has a number of officials here, and then the combination of those, and also some member states and also military intelligence. So we have something called SIAG, which is single intelligence assessments. So you basically have the input from military intelligence and civilian intelligence, and we do not have spies on the ground or operatives on the ground, but these agents or officials that are here can actually call the capitals and request the information. So for instance, very clear case, let's think Venezuela. How many European Union member states of the 27 have spies in Venezuela? Well, it might have been Spain, Italy, the Netherlands, because they have maybe France, maybe Germany. Okay, but that's 5. So you have 22 that do not. No? The report that the INCEN prepares on Venezuela is shared with all. Maybe the Spanish spies or the Italian spies are not sharing all of the information with INCEN. It's very possible, but they share a lot. So in terms of awareness, situational awareness of what's going on, I was reading today confidential reports. I read like 20. I think I have. Well, for instance, on India, on Islamist terrorism in India, a wide number of reports. So we do have the bulk of that information. And sorry, we're not. We don't need a Tom Cruise for the things that we do. You don't need spies that go and fix and kidnap and torture and whatever. No, that's not what we do. So we didn't. I think we were covered. What I would do is reinforce INCEN. So instead of 200 officials, it has 400. I'm making up the numbers, but that is very much something that we're trying to make.
So we have the assets in the member states, and what we do in this particular case is to put them together,
ask them to share information,
for everyone.
And then in intelligence, the information is very important, but the most important thing is the analysis. We also have SATSEN, which is in Torrejón. So I've visited SATSEN. SATSEN is some satellite capacity, but most of the satellite pictures they buy in the commercial market. So if you want a picture of I don't know the house at Mar-a-Lago in Florida or I don't know whatever, you can get it. I don't know how you do that, but there's you can buy it. You give the coordinates, and then you decide if you want it black and white or whatever, or you want it horizontal or vertical, whatever. And that is okay, $5,000 or $2,000. You can buy that. The problem, this is like when you go to an X-ray to the doctor. Huh? The doctor shows you the X-ray and says, "You see, you have this," and you don't see anything. The important thing is how you have to knowledge how reading it. And that's what Satsen has, and that is also shared with Vincent. So we do have a pretty good degree of information, I would say.
And this answer is linked with the other one, which is made once and again. Everybody asks about that, at least to me.
Let me
here
guess.
in Madrid.
The European Army.
Yeah, see. So could you explain them, please, clearly that we have enough assets?
No, we don't have enough assets. No,
no. So I was mistaken.
No, but see, I said it earlier. We don't have an army, and we're not trying to get one. We don't need an army, and nobody wants an army headed by me, right? So that would be even worse. Member states are and will remain primarily responsible for their national defense. When it comes to collective defense, they already have an organization which is called NATO. 23 are in NATO, 4 are neutral. Malta, Cyprus, Austria, and Ireland. But the other 23 are in NATO. So when it comes to collective defense, they already agree in NATO with the US, Turkey, Iceland, Montenegro, and the UK, and a couple of others, Albania, 33, but or 32. But they do that in NATO, and NATO has an integrated military command and chain of command. So if worst comes to worst, and there's a war, NATO fights a war, and then you have an American general, a French colonel, an Italian lieutenant, and whatever, and they can fight together. That's why interoperability is also very important, because then you have all of these tanks that are, interoperable. Is easier. That's the army that defends the European continent from armed aggression, should there be one. So why do we need an EU army?
So it's a multinational army integrated in the NATO, and it could work even if the United States is out of the NATO.
Well, that's something else. So what we need, in view of the increase of the threat, we need to make that army more capable of countering. And contrary to what people believe, it is, the Russians or the USSR in the past, during the Cold War, they always had conventional superiority. They have more people, more tanks, more cannons, more missiles. So it's not like NATO is almighty. So we need to reinforce NATO. How? Well, by reinforcing the Spanish component, the Italian component, the German component, the French component, which is why we're trying to allow them to have more money and spend it better, etc., etc. Fine. So what you are actually doing by doing all of that is reinforcing the European contribution to NATO. Some people call it European pillar in NATO. One of the basic rules in NATO is that there are no subclubs. They're all the same. So if you call it the European pillar in NATO, you're already raising some eyebrows. I don't like to. I'm talking about the European contribution to NATO. So all of the Europeans need to contribute a lot more. Why? Well, because it's bloody Europe. It doesn't make any sense that the US has to. If I were American, I would be outraged. You don't need to be Trump to see that it is not sustainable. As I said before, I want them to reduce gradually and only partially, but our part of the bargain is spending more. Then we can discuss if it's 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, whatever is reasonable. But you need to spend more. And then, of course, you have the second thing, and that goes to your other question. So what if the US leaves? Okay, well, what if I have cancer tomorrow? Well, I don't like to ask those questions. If I have cancer tomorrow, then I'll deal with it. But why worry with that? Why don't we worry about doing what is necessary to make sure that the American withdrawal is only partial and gradual, rather than drastic and unilateral? So part of that is spending more. If we spend more rapidly and the US withdraws gradually. Can we replace the US? Well, depends. Partially, yes. Can we develop a nuclear umbrella like the US has? Probably not.
No.
Many people would not want to, and it would be very costly and very expensive. So I would hope that the American nuclear guarantee, in the case of a nuclear concept, or in terms of mutual destruction, deterrence, would remain. So I cannot answer your question. Can we replace the US if US leaves NATO? Well, it depends what it. The answer is not fully,
Not
and
fully.
certainly not tomorrow.
No, but my idea for the guys on YouTube is that what that exists right now is a kind of fully structured command
Yes.
among the European armies, and they are completely
Let me put it.
interoperable.
Let me put it a different way. If the US would leave, God forbid, certainly the European army, it would be much easier to make NATO the European army than to start that to build
That's
a
the
EU
idea.
army on its own.
That's the idea. Okay. Any questions? I think it's more than enough. I have many others about the issue of money and funding, but maybe
Well,
for
money
another
and
day.
funding is very easy. What we've done is we've allowed member states to increase their public expenditure on defense by 1.5% of GDP without counting in the national deficit calculations that we do every year. And actually, the
That was
Commission
one of the questions.
Yeah.
What about the
1.5 for defense, and we will not look at that when we will not include that in the calculation of the national deficit. That's one. Two, we made available 150 billion, so 150,000 million in Spanish for defense. But this one is for joint procurement, and therefore it's for defense investment. The 1.5 you may spend in salaries. You may hire more. You may buy fuel. You may logistics, whatever, running costs. You may buy it in Malaysia if you want. But the 150 billion in loans has to be together with another one. So at least with another member state, excuse me, or Ukraine, or Norway actually. So at least two, hopefully more, to buy or develop capabilities. So those are the two big initiatives. The 150 billion in loans was adopted in the council a week ago.
Mhm.
And we have another program which is pending, which is hopefully going to be adopted very soon. And we are going to have, even if there would be a ceasefire in Ukraine tomorrow, we're going to have una riada de millones. I don't know how you say that. A massive flow,
I'm pretty sure they're going to
a
understand.
massive flow of money towards defense and defense dual-use related industry in the coming 10 years, at the very least.
Including infrastructures, dual-use infrastructure.
Sure, and military mobility is dual-use infrastructure, for instance. But yes, if I were an entity, certainly a private entity, but whether it's a bank or a defense industry company or a university, I would try to join that bandwagon because it's going to be a regular stream of funds for the coming decade, for sure. Because the threat is not going to go away. If, as I think I didn't say it, but if the war with Ukraine would end tomorrow, as we all hope, Ukraine would be 10 times better. But the threat on us would actually increase because Russia could rearm, whereas it cannot right now. So, you know, this is going to happen, and I would want to be part of it, not only for economic reasons, but also for economic reasons.
Mhm. So thank you very much. It has been really a pleasure. Thank
Muchas
you
gracias a vosotros.
for this excellent presentation of the views of the new European policy. Y espero que todos los que me preguntan todas las semanas por el ejército europeo les haya quedado ya clara la situación, porque es semanal la pregunta. Y nada más, muchísimas gracias.
Gracias a vosotros.